The Interstellar Naval Academy's survival training facility existed in that peculiar space between educational institution and elaborate torture device, though most faculty preferred the term character-building experience. Commander Zex-9 had presided over this particular flavor of institutional sadism for the better part of 3 decades, watching wide-eyed cadets from 47 different species discover precisely how unprepared they were for a universe that actively despised their continued existence. Today's batch looked particularly doomed. "Attention, final-year cadets." Zex-9's voice carried the weight of someone who had delivered this speech too many times to maintain any pretense of enthusiasm. "Your survival examination will determine whether you graduate to active duty or spend another delightful semester explaining to your families why the Academy standards have apparently declined since their day." The assembled cadets, a colorful assortment of scales, tentacles, and existential dread, shifted nervously in the amphitheater. Zex-9's compound eyes swept over them with the practiced assessment of a mortician measuring coffins. "We begin, as tradition dictates, with Class 1 worlds: breathable atmosphere, tolerable gravity, abundant water. The sort of place your great-grandmothers might have chosen for retirement." A holographic display flickered to life, showing a pastoral landscape that could have graced a vacation brochure. "Cadet Vorth Prime?" A mantis-like being with iridescent wings clicked forward. "Present, Commander." "Congratulations. You've volunteered for the Garden Planet. Try not to die from overconfidence." The progression continued with mechanical precision. Class 2 worlds for those who showed promise but needed humbling. Class 3 for the overachievers. Each assignment met with varying degrees of resignation and barely concealed panic. Zex-9 had refined this particular psychological torture to an art form. Never reveal the final challenge until the very end, when their imaginations had conjured scenarios far worse than reality. Usually. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. "Cadet Thais Ka," Zex-9 continued, indicating a slug-like being whose entire body quivered with nervous energy. "Class 9 world. Acid rain, carnivorous flora, atmospheric pressure that will crush your bones to powder if you sneeze wrong." "Commander," Thiska's translator struggled with what sounded like a whimper. "Surely there's been some mistake?" "The only mistake would be graduating someone who questions their superior's judgment." Next. The remaining assignments grew progressively more nightmarish. Class X worlds where the very air was toxic. Class 11 environments where gravity fluctuated randomly, and the local wildlife had evolved specifically to hunt anything foolish enough to visit, which brought them to the final candidate. Exchange Cadet Thompson. A bipedal figure near the back of the assembly raised what appeared to be a hand. The human looked remarkably unremarkable. No natural armor, no visible weapons, no apparent adaptations for survival beyond an opposable thumb and what the Academy's xenobiology texts generously described as persistent delusion regarding personal invincibility. Zex-9 paused, savoring the moment. In 30 years of conducting these examinations, this particular revelation never grew old. "Class 12 Deathworld," he announced, watching the amphitheater erupt in horrified gasps. "Preliminary survey designates it as Nightmare 77 Kappa. Surface temperature varies between -80 and +160 degrees. Atmospheric composition includes sulfur compounds, trace radioactive particles, and what our xenochemistry team describes as molecularly aggressive precipitation." The holographic display updated, showing a planet that appeared to have been designed by a committee of sadists with unlimited budgets and severe personality disorders. Lightning storms raged across continents of jagged obsidian. Volcanic eruptions painted the sky in shades of orange that hurt to observe. Steam rose from oceans that might have been water or might have been liquefied despair. The local ecosystem, Zex-9 continued with the enthusiasm of someone describing a particularly virulent plague, consists entirely of apex predators. No herbivores, no bottom feeders, just an endless hierarchy of creatures competing to see which can kill you most creatively. Our preliminary scans detected 17 different species of carnivorous plants, 43 varieties of venomous atmospheric fungi, and something our computers refuse to classify beyond "please don't." The amphitheater had fallen silent except for the sound of several cadets quietly hyperventilating. Radiation levels exceed safe exposure limits by a factor of 12. Seismic activity occurs roughly every 4 minutes. The weather patterns appear to be actively malevolent. Our survey drones, Zex-9's voice carried a note of genuine bewilderment. Our survey drones didn't return. They didn't crash. They didn't malfunction. They simply ceased to exist approximately 7 minutes after entering the atmosphere. Cadet Vorth Prime raised a trembling appendage. "Commander, surely this is meant as some form of motivational exercise. Nobody could survive on such a world." Indeed. Which is why Exchange Cadet Thompson will be provided with our most advanced survival gear, emergency beacon, and detailed instructions on how to activate the extraction protocol the moment things go inevitably wrong. All compound eyes, optical sensors, and various other visual apparatus turned toward the human, expecting to find someone in the advanced stages of psychological breakdown. Instead, Thompson appeared to be taking notes. "Question, Commander," the human said, voice carrying the sort of casual interest usually reserved for discussing weather patterns. "Speak. When you say molecularly aggressive precipitation, are we talking about acid rain or something more exotic? And what's the seasonal variation like? I'm trying to figure out what gear to pack." The silence that followed suggested that several cadets were reconsidering their career choices. "You're not concerned about the survival challenge?" asked Cadet Thais Ka, whose translator now carried undertones of hysteria. Thompson shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both dismissal and mild amusement. "I mean, it sounds unpleasant, but nothing I haven't dealt with before. The temperature range is actually pretty reasonable. That's just summer in Arizona versus winter in Minnesota. The wildlife situation sounds challenging, but at least everything's carnivorous. Means I won't have to worry about accidentally stepping on something harmless." "The radiation levels," Zex-9 began. "Yeah, that's annoying. I'll need to pack extra sunscreen. What's the atmospheric density like? Please tell me it's not one of those low-pressure environments where you have to worry about your blood boiling." Commander Zex-9 had overseen the training of thousands of cadets representing dozens of species across multiple decades. He had watched brave warriors reduce to quivering terror at the prospect of Class 6 worlds. He had seen tactical geniuses break down weeping when assigned to Class 8 environments. He had never encountered anyone who responded to a Class 12 deathworld assignment by asking about sunscreen recommendations. "The atmospheric pressure," he said slowly, "is roughly 3 times your homeworld standard." "Oh, good. High pressure's easier to deal with than low pressure. Anything else I should know? Local day-night cycle? Seasonal weather patterns? Are we talking about a short rotation or one of those tidally locked nightmare situations?" The amphitheater had achieved a quality of silence usually associated with funeral services or particularly solemn religious ceremonies. Thompson continued making notes with the sort of methodical attention typically reserved for grocery lists. "Exchange Cadet Thompson," Zex-9 said, his voice carrying 3 decades of accumulated bewilderment. "Are you perhaps unfamiliar with the concept of self-preservation?" "Not at all, Commander." I'm just trying to plan appropriately. You mentioned 17 species of carnivorous plants. Are they mobile or rooted? Because that changes the whole tactical approach. And the venomous atmospheric fungi, do they release spores? Or is it a contact toxin situation? Cadet Vorth Prime leaned toward their nearest neighbor. Is this normal behavior for humans? I've never seen a human before today, came the whispered reply. Maybe they're all insane. Thompson looked up from their notes. Actually, this sounds like it might be fun. When do we ship out? Commander Zex-9 realized, with the sort of clarity that usually accompanied religious revelations or severe head trauma, that 30 years of training had not prepared him for this conversation. Medical Officer Keth Vralk prided herself on maintaining professional composure under circumstances that would send lesser beings screaming into the void. 20 years of patching up Academy cadets had exposed her to injuries that defied both medical logic and basic physics. She had successfully treated spontaneous organ reversals, temporal displacement syndrome, and once, memorably, a cadet who had somehow managed to turn himself inside out while remaining conscious throughout the process. Thompson's medical file, however, was breaking her. Run the metabolic scan again, she instructed her assistant, a nervous creature whose species had evolved from particularly anxious flowers. Officer Keth Vralk, this is the 14th time we've performed this diagnostic. The results remain consistent. Consistent with what? Keth Vralk's forearms gestured at the display with barely controlled frustration. These readings suggest the subject should have expired from multiple organ failure approximately 6 standard minutes after birth. Look at these bone density measurements. They indicate a skeletal structure that should collapse under the weight of its own circulatory system. Thompson sat on the examination table, reading what appeared to be a paperback novel titled 50 Ways to Prepare Roadkill, a Survivalist's Cookbook. The human had arrived for pre-deployment medical screening, wearing civilian clothes, and carrying a duffel bag that smelled suspiciously of camping gear. The cardiovascular readings are equally impossible, continued Keth Vralk's assistant, whose petals had begun wilting with stress. The heart rate indicates imminent cardiac arrest, while simultaneously suggesting an athlete in peak physical condition. The contradiction is making our equipment question its own existence. Maybe your machines are just having an off day? Thompson suggested, without looking up from the book. I feel fine. Had my annual physical 3 months ago. Doctor said I was in excellent health for someone who spends too much time hiking in places that technically qualify as natural disasters. Keth Vralk's secondary brain, the one responsible for processing information too disturbing for her primary consciousness, began filing formal complaints with her hypothalamus. Human, your blood analysis indicates the presence of compounds that should be immediately fatal to carbon-based life forms. Your plasma contains trace elements that exist only in the cores of dying stars. Oh, that? I spent last summer working cleanup at a geothermal plant. You should see what mercury poisoning looks like on these scanners. This isn't mercury poisoning, Keth Vralk said with the patience of someone explaining basic mathematics to a particularly stubborn child. This is like your body has adapted to process materials that shouldn't exist outside of theoretical physics textbooks. Meanwhile, in the equipment preparation bay, Chief Quartermaster Dol Brex was experiencing his own crisis of professional competence. The Dolbarian had earned his reputation by outfitting expeditions to environments so hostile that they existed primarily as mathematical concepts. His storage facility contained protective gear that could keep a cadet alive inside a black hole's event horizon, assuming they remembered to charge the batteries. Thompson had politely declined everything except a basic field pack and what appeared to be hiking boots. Explain to me again why you don't want the molecular stabilization field? Dol Brex's voice carried the tone of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had been personally insulted. Too bulky, Thompson replied. testing the weight of a compass that looked like it had been purchased from a camping supply store circa 20 years ago. Besides, I've never trusted equipment I can't maintain myself. These fancy force fields are great until the power cell dies and you're stuck in a radioactive thunderstorm with nothing but blinking lights and a very expensive paperweight. The power cells are rated for continuous operation under combat conditions for 6 standard months. Sure, but what happens if something goes wrong? I'd rather have gear I understand than gear that understands me. Can I get one of those old-fashioned water purification tablets? The kind that taste terrible but actually work? Dalbrex consulted his inventory manifest with the expression of someone discovering that their religion had been fundamentally incorrect. Human, you're requesting equipment rated for Class 3 environments at most. You're deploying to a world that our scientists describe as aggressively committed to ending all known forms of life. Right, but think about it from a logistics perspective. Simple gear means fewer failure points. Fewer failure points means more reliable performance when things get ugly. And let's face it, on a Class 12 world, things are definitely going to get ugly. The Quartermaster's species had evolved from creatures that survived by obsessively collecting shiny objects and hiding them in complex underground lairs. His every instinct screamed that this approach violated the fundamental principles of preparation and paranoia that had kept his ancestors alive for millions of years. At minimum, you need the atmospheric processor. Without it, you'll be breathing poison within minutes of hitting the surface. Thompson held up what looked like a standard-issue military gas mask, the sort of thing that might have been state-of-the-art several decades ago. This should handle the worst of it. I've got backup filters and a couple of those emergency air canisters for the really nasty stuff. That mask is designed for filtering industrial pollutants, not for surviving in an atmosphere composed primarily of weaponized chemistry. Look, Chief, I appreciate the concern, but trust me on this one. Half the places I've been hiking back home make your Class 12 world sound like a wellness retreat. Sometimes the old-fashioned approach works better than all the high-tech solutions. 3 decks up, in the Tactical Briefing Center, Strategic Planning Officer Ming Dral was discovering that her carefully prepared presentation had become an exercise in existential horror. The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of Nightmare 7-7 Kappa's surface, with threat assessments updated in real time as new data arrived from long-range sensors. The predator distribution patterns suggest an ecosystem designed by someone with advanced degrees in both zoology and psychological warfare, Mingdral explained to the assembled briefing team. Every environmental niche has been filled by something that actively hunts sentient beings. We've identified pack hunters that coordinate using what appears to be tactical telepathy, solitary apex predators that camouflage themselves as natural terrain features, and something that our xenobiology team has classified as living nightmare fuel. Dr. Tis Maul, the Academy's senior xenobiologist, tentacled nervously at his datapad. The atmospheric spore count alone should trigger immediate respiratory failure in any known species. These organisms don't just colonize lung tissue, they actively restructure it into something more suitable for their reproductive needs. What about the geological instability? Asked someone from the back of the room. Mingdral's presentation updated to show seismic activity patterns that resembled the heartbeat of something very large and very angry. The planet appears to be tectonically hyperactive. Ground tremors occur every 3 to 4 minutes, with major upheavals happening roughly twice per standard day. The volcanic activity follows no recognizable pattern, which suggests either complete geological chaos or intentional malevolence. How does Thompson plan to address these challenges? Dr. Tismol inquired, his translator somehow managing to convey both professional curiosity and personal dread. Mingdral consulted her notes with the expression of someone reading their own obituary. According to the human's tactical planning session, quote, "Stay flexible, keep moving, and remember that everything's trying to kill you anyway, so don't take it personally." The briefing room fell silent, except for the sound of several species equivalent of nervous breathing. That's the entire tactical plan? The human also mentioned something about reading the terrain and adapting to local conditions, but refused to elaborate when pressed for specifics. Dr. Tis Moll's tentacles had begun unconsciously arranging themselves into what his species recognized as protective configurations. Did Thompson request any specialized briefings on local fauna, environmental adaptation strategies, emergency medical protocols? Mingdral checked her schedule. The human asked if anyone knew whether the planet had anything resembling coffee beans. Control tower. Sigma-9 had monitored survival exercises across 17 sectors for the better part of a galactic standard year. Communications operator Wextal had witnessed cadets face down interdimensional parasites, navigate gravity storms, and survive atmospheric entry using nothing but emergency protocols and sheer terror-driven determination. She maintained professional detachment through a carefully cultivated philosophy that most beings were essentially doomed anyway. So why get emotionally invested? Today was testing that philosophy to its breaking point. Deployment successful across all target zones, reported technical specialist Grixmos, whose cybernetic implants flickered with streams of telemetry data. Cadet Vorth Prime's vitals show expected stress responses for Class Y environment integration. Cadet This Ka is, well, still breathing, which exceeds initial projections for Class 9 survival. The command center's main display showed a grid of biometric readouts, each one a small window into various degrees of personal catastrophe, unfolding across multiple worlds. Green indicators for stable conditions, yellow for manageable stress, red for situations requiring immediate extraction protocols. Thompson's signal glowed a steady, almost insulting green. "Run a diagnostic on monitoring station 12, Wextal instructed, her tone carrying the sort of forced calm usually associated with emergency medical procedures. Either our equipment has suffered complete systems failure, or Exchange Cadet Thompson is somehow thriving in conditions that should have liquefied their skeleton by now." Grixmos's implants sparked with increased activity. "Diagnostics complete, all systems operating within normal parameters. No equipment malfunctions detected." Then explain why Thompson's heart rate suggests someone taking a pleasant afternoon stroll while simultaneously recording environmental exposure that should cause immediate cellular breakdown. The tactical display updated with real-time surface conditions. Nightmare? 77 Kappa was living up to its designation with the sort of enthusiastic malevolence that suggested the planet took personal pride in its work. Atmospheric pressure readings fluctuated wildly as competing weather systems attempted to achieve maximum lethality. Radiation spikes occurred with clockwork regularity, each one sufficient to sterilize most known forms of life. Thompson's positional marker moved steadily across terrain that had reduced their survey drones to subatomic particles. "Sir," Grixmos said, his voice carrying undertones of species-specific panic, "I'm receiving radio transmissions from the human's position." "Emergency beacon activation?" "Negative. This appears to be routine status reports." Wextal activated the communication channel, expecting to hear the final words of someone experiencing rapid biological termination. Instead, Thompson's voice emerged from the speakers with the casual clarity of someone providing traffic updates. "Control tower, this is Thompson. Just touched down about 20 minutes ago. Initial assessment, definitely hostile, but manageable. Local wildlife seems more curious than immediately aggressive, though I'm keeping my distance until I figure out their behavioral patterns." The command center achieved that particular quality of silence usually reserved for moments when fundamental assumptions about reality proved incorrect. Thompson, Wextal responded carefully, please confirm your current status. Are you experiencing any adverse environmental effects? Air's pretty nasty. Definitely need the respirator for extended exposure. Ground's unstable, but nothing worse than hiking through an active construction zone. The local geology seems to follow some kind of pattern, so I'm tracking tremor intervals to time my movements. Specialist Grixmos consulted his readouts with the expression of someone discovering that mathematics had been personally insulting his intelligence. Exchange Cadet Thompson, our sensors indicate atmospheric composition that should cause immediate respiratory distress in any carbon-based life form. Yeah, it's definitely not pleasant. Smells like someone set a sulfur mine on fire inside a chemical plant. But the gas mask's handling the worst of it, and I've got backup filters if things get really ugly. Our readings show radiation levels. Oh, that. Yeah, I noticed. Brought some of those potassium iodide tablets just in case. Probably going to glow in the dark for a few weeks after this, but nothing I can't handle. Wextal found herself experiencing the sort of existential crisis usually reserved for philosophers contemplating the heat death of the universe. Thompson, you're reporting manageable conditions on a world classified as uninhabitable by every known scientific standard. Well, I wouldn't want to retire here, but it's not the worst place I've been camping. Give me a few hours to establish a secure perimeter, and I'll send some detailed environmental notes. The communication channel closed, leaving the command center to grapple with information that violated several basic principles of xenobiology, physics, and common sense. 3 hours later, the situation had progressed from puzzling to genuinely disturbing. Cadet This Ka had activated emergency extraction after discovering that their Class 9 world contained predators capable of quantum tunneling. Cadet Vorth Prime was requesting immediate medical evacuation due to an allergic reaction to what should have been perfectly safe atmospheric pollen. Thompson continued broadcasting routine status updates that suggested a pleasant hiking experience. Control Tower, Thompson here. Found some interesting geological formations about 2 clicks north of the landing zone. Also, I think I know why your survey drones disappeared. There's something down here that specifically evolved to hunt mechanical objects. Saw it. Take down what looked like a maintenance robot. Fascinating adaptive behavior. Thompson, Wextal said, her voice now carrying the strain of someone questioning the fundamental nature of existence. Are you reporting that you've encountered the predator responsible for destroying our reconnaissance equipment? Oh yeah, definitely. Watched it for about 20 minutes. Amazing hunting strategy. It mimics technological signatures to lure mechanical prey, then disintegrates them with some kind of directed electromagnetic pulse. I kept my gear powered down and stayed behind cover. Beautiful creature, actually. Probably weighs about 3 tons and moves like liquid shadow. Grixmos's cybernetic implants had begun displaying what might charitably be described as electronic confusion. You observed a 3-ton apex predator and described it as beautiful? From a safe distance, yeah. The bioluminescent patterning is incredible, like watching Aurora Borealis with teeth. I got some good sketches before it moved on to hunt something else. You were sketching? Field notes are important. How else am I supposed to remember the details for my report? Speaking of which, I'm seeing some plant life that might be edible if properly prepared. Nothing immediately toxic, though I'll need to run some basic tests before trying anything. The communication channel crackled with atmospheric interference that sounded suspiciously like the planet itself, expressing disapproval of Thompson's continued existence. Thompson, Wextal said slowly, you're considering eating native flora on a Class 12 deathworld? Only after proper preparation and testing. I'm not stupid, but some of these root vegetables look promising, and if I'm going to be here for the full evaluation period, I might as well see what's available locally. 6 hours into the exercise, Standard operating procedure dictated that Wextal should have activated emergency protocols for any cadet showing signs of psychological breakdown. The problem was determining whether Thompson had suffered complete mental collapse or whether the rest of the galaxy had been fundamentally wrong about the nature of survivable environments. Final status report from Thompson's position, Grixmos announced, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose worldview had been systematically demolished. The human reports establishing temporary shelter, identifying 3 sources of potable water after filtration, cataloging 17 species of local fauna with detailed behavioral notes, and successfully making contact with what appears to be a pack of semi-intelligent predators. Contact? Peaceful contact, apparently. Thompson describes them as curious but cautious, probably more afraid of me than I am of them. The human has been sharing food with them. Wextal realized that 20 years of emergency response training had not prepared her for a situation where the most dangerous assignment in Academy history had turned into what appeared to be a nature documentary, narrated by someone's impossibly optimistic uncle. Director Quell Vash had built her career on the principle that the universe was a fundamentally hostile place that required constant vigilance, superior technology, and substantial quantities of caffeine to navigate successfully. As head of Academy survival operations, she had overseen countless training exercises where bright-eyed cadets discovered that their theoretical knowledge meant approximately nothing when faced with environments actively committed to their destruction. Thompson's file was forcing her to reconsider several fundamental assumptions about reality. "Run this past me again," she said, settling into her chair with the deliberate movements of someone preparing for psychological warfare. "Our most advanced monitoring equipment confirms that Exchange Cadet Thompson has not only survived 72 hours on Nightmare 77 Kappa, but has somehow established what appears to be a thriving base camp." Recovery team leader Hark Dorr shifted uncomfortably in his environmental suit. His species had evolved in the vacuum of space, making them ideally suited for rescue operations in hostile environments. He had pulled cadets out of situations that existed primarily as theoretical nightmares in advanced physics textbooks. He had never encountered a rescue operation where the subject refused extraction because they were still setting up the garden. The human has constructed shelter using local materials, established multiple redundant water sources, and appears to have domesticated several apex predators, Harkdor reported, with the tone of someone reading their own death certificate. When we arrived at the designated extraction point, Thompson was teaching something that looked like a cross between a mountain lion and a tactical nuclear weapon how to play fetch. Fetch. With what appeared to be a makeshift ball constructed from the shed carapace of something our xenobiology database refuses to classify. Director Quell Vash consulted her datapad, hoping to find some explanation that didn't require fundamentally rewriting the Academy's understanding of survival training. What was Thompson's response to extraction protocols? The human asked if we could come back next week. Apparently, there's some kind of seasonal migration pattern they want to observe. And quote, "It would be a shame to miss something this educational." Educational. Thompson has also requested permission to extend the survival exercise indefinitely, citing excellent research opportunities and the most relaxing vacation I've had in years. Senior xenobiologist Dr. Fifth Moss materialized in the doorway with the urgent gait of someone carrying information that would ruin everyone's day. Her tentacles writhed with barely contained academic excitement and what might have been existential terror. "Director, we have a problem. A significant problem. A problem that calls into question everything we thought we knew about deathworld classification." Director Quell Vash experienced the sort of premonition usually associated with receiving tax audits, or discovering that one's life insurance policy contained unexpected clauses. Explain. We've been reviewing Thompson's planet of origin in light of recent events. Earth's classification in our galactic database appears to contain several discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? Dr. Fithmoss activated the holographic display, showing a planet that looked suspiciously normal from orbital distance. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents, the sort of place that might advertise itself as a retirement destination for species with modest environmental requirements. According to our initial survey data, Earth was classified as a Class 3 world: moderate gravity, breathable atmosphere, abundant water, standard temperate environment suitable for most carbon-based life forms. That sounds reasonable. It would be if our initial survey data bore any resemblance to actual surface conditions. Dr. Fithmoss's tentacles began arranging themselves into configurations that her species associated with delivering terrible news. Director, Earth's environment includes atmospheric phenomena that regularly generate electromagnetic pulses capable of leveling entire cities. The planet experiences temperature variations that range from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius as routine seasonal fluctuations. Director Quelvache felt her primary brain beginning to request backup support from her auxiliary nervous system. That's approaching Class 8 designation. It gets worse. Earth's geological activity includes tectonic shifts that regularly reshape entire continents, volcanic eruptions that can alter global atmospheric composition, oceanic systems that generate storm formations with wind speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. Class X territory. The planet's ecosystem, Doctor. Fithmoss continued with the relentless precision of someone conducting a particularly thorough autopsy. Includes predators that actively hunt the dominant species for sport, microscopic organisms that can dissolve organic matter on contact, plant life that produces compounds toxic enough to kill most known life forms within minutes of exposure. How is anything alive on this planet? That's where things become truly disturbing. The dominant species, humans, don't just survive these conditions. They actively seek them out for recreational purposes. We have documented evidence of humans voluntarily exposing themselves to extreme temperature variations, deliberately entering environments populated by hostile predators, and consuming biological compounds that should cause immediate organ failure. Director Quelvache's worldview was experiencing the sort of systematic collapse usually associated with discovering that one's understanding of basic mathematics had been fundamentally incorrect. You're telling me that Earth should be classified as a Class 12 death world? Director, based on actual environmental conditions rather than our erroneous initial survey, Earth exceeds Class 12 parameters. We don't have a classification system for planets this hostile to life because we never imagined anything could evolve under such conditions. The conference room fell silent, except for the sound of several species equivalent of nervous breathing, and one case of what might have been whimpering. So when Thompson described Nightmare 77 Kappa as pretty reasonable camping weather, the human was providing an accurate assessment based on their species' environmental standards. What we consider a death world that actively seeks to destroy all known forms of life, they consider a mildly challenging hiking destination. Recovery team leader Hark Dorr consulted his mission logs with the expression of someone discovering that their life insurance premiums were about to increase dramatically. Director, this explains Thompson's final transmission before we departed the extraction zone, which was, quote, "Thanks for the ride, but I think I'll walk back. This place has the most amazing night sky, and I've always wanted to try camping under an aurora that can be seen from orbit." Director Quelvache realized that the Academy's survival training program would require substantial revision, possibly starting with the fundamental question of what constituted a survivable environment and whether their current understanding of hostile conditions had been embarrassingly conservative. Outside the conference room windows, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the fact that somewhere among them was a species that considered deathworlds appropriate venues for family vacations and character-building experiences. Thompson's final status report had included a request for camping recommendations and a casual mention that next time they'd bring marshmallows.